I'm Madison Anderson, a software engineer in my early 30s, living independently in Cleveland. I've worked hard to build my life here stable job, my own place, and a reliable 2021 Toyota Highlander that's fully paid off, with low mileage and a pristine interior. It's more than just a vehicle, it's my freedom. How I commute for work and stay self-reliant. I don't lend it out. Not even to close friends. Especially after what happened last time. My parents borrowed my car for the weekend to take my golden sister and her kids out. Come Monday, I had a $1,900 towing bill and the police ringing my phone. When I confronted them, before heading out of town, I made it crystal clear, don't touch my car. Not for any reason not to move it. Not for errands. Not even in an emergency. I was flying to Indianapolis for a 4-day project meeting, packed with sessions and networking I'd planned for months. The night before, I called home to check in and reinforce the rule, reminding them I'd be away and nothing at my place was to be disturbed, particularly the car. The last incident still burned in my mind. My sister had grabbed the keys for a quick trip and ended up in a fender bender while distracted on her phone, leaving me with over $4,000 in repairs I wasn't involved in. They brushed it off as her learning moment. But to me, it was a blatant disregard. After that, I locked it down permanently, no exceptions. I secured the car in my driveway, left a spare key with my colleague down the block just for real emergencies like a break-in, not for use, certainly not by family. As I boarded the flight, I felt a nagging unease, but pushed it aside, focusing on the conference ahead. Little did I know, that weekend would unravel everything in ways I couldn't ignore. If you've ever faced family boundaries being crossed like this, smash that like button and subscribe for more real stories that hit close to home. The conference room buzzed with final preparations, but my focus shattered when my phone started vibrating insistently on the table. I glanced at the unknown number, tempted to silence it amid the networking chatter around me. Yet it persisted, ringing a third time, pulling me away from the agenda, answering cautiously. I heard a steady voice introduce himself as Officer Anthony Brooks from the Kansas City Police Department. He verified my details as Madison Anderson, owner of the registered Toyota Highlander, before diving into the report. The car had been impounded from a suburban street in Kansas City, where it had blocked a homeowner's driveway all weekend long. Irritated residents, unable to maneuver out for their morning commutes, had alerted authorities to the improperly parked vehicle that seemed abandoned without any consideration for neighborhood norms. A wave of shock coursed through me as the implications sank in. This wasn't some random towing. The car had been positioned carelessly, as though the occupants assumed entitlement over public spaces. Officer Brooks relayed that the people linked to it didn't align with the ownership records, and a woman identifying as my mother had argued it was a shared family asset used with my approval. The retrieval cost hovered at $1,900, and absent my endorsement, the case might proceed as unauthorized vehicle operation, potentially involving further legal scrutiny. Internally, I grappled with a torrent of emotions: outrage at the audacity, frustration over the financial hit, and a deepening sense of violation that pierced through my professional facade. I didn't waver in my response, stating firmly that permission had never been granted for anyone to access or drive the car, much less transport it across state lines. Recalling the explicit instructions I'd given before departing Cleveland, I urged him to mark it as such if they remained in possession. He acknowledged my position and ended the call with assurance of an update. Barely 10 minutes passed before he rang again, confirming the Highlander had been spotted on the highway en route back to Cleveland. Officers had initiated a stop, evacuating all passengers and securing the vehicle for processing. Visualizing the disruption from afar intensified my inner turmoil, the family clustered on the roadside shoulder, their impromptu getaway crumbling under flashing lights. The children must have been distraught, surrounded by remnants of their adventure, sandy footwear, discarded toys, and the lingering scent of leisure that now turned chaotic. Officer Brooks detailed the interception occurring just beyond a rural exit, where the car still bore signs of misused beach equipment crammed inside, wrappers strewn about, and traces of a dog's presence everywhere. It painted a vivid picture of negligence, one that fueled my resolve amid the conference's lingering energy. Their desperate attempts to reach me flooded in shortly after not a single call from my mom, my dad, or Katie went answered. Notifications piled up, but I diverted my attention to the session's closing remarks, channeling the simmering rage into composure. This breach went beyond inconvenience. It exposed a calculated disregard. From breaching my garage security with an outdated code, to exploiting a spare key Katie had covertly replicated, transforming my prized possession into their mobile hub for a trip laden with coolers, chairs, and uninvited passengers including Clayton and the dog, entrusted for simple care. Later that afternoon, a seldom contacted cousin messaged with snippets of the fallout, pieced together from overheard accounts. The scene had devolved into disarray, youngsters wailing amid heaps of luggage, my mom vocally contesting the officer's authority on grounds of familial bonds. My dad tried bargaining, his efforts futile against protocol. Forced to improvise, they summoned a ride-share van for the lengthy haul back to Cleveland, incurring expenses exceeding $300. Midway, my dad's payment method failed, likely strained by prior charges or the towing itself, compelling Katie to coax Clayton into covering the remainder. That ride stretched into a stifling silence, punctuated by undercurrents of resentment and finger-pointing, each person stewing in their role without venturing another outreach to me. As evening approached, I muted alerts entirely and settled for a modest hotel meal, the day's revelations weighing heavily. It transcended the physical damage. It highlighted entrenched patterns of entitlement I'd overlooked, gazing at the urban horizon, coffee in hand. A steely clarity emerged. I refused to intervene, allowing the repercussions to unfold naturally, setting the stage for irreversible shifts upon my return to Cleveland. The barrage of voicemails started rolling in the following morning as I wrapped up the conference in Indianapolis. My phone became a relentless source of notifications, each one a fresh stab of manipulation from back home. The messages piled up from my mom, my dad, and Katie, none offering even a hint of remorse. Instead, they twisted the narrative, emphasizing how I owed them for years of supposed sacrifices, how family naturally shared resources without question. One from Lori droned on about the burdens of raising me, implying my success meant repayment in kind, while Patrick's voice carried a tone of disappointed authority, reminding me that blood ties superseded personal boundaries. Katie's contribution echoed the sentiment, accusing me of pettiness over something as trivial as a vehicle, framing their actions as harmless bonding time. Not a single apology surfaced, only layers of guilt and deflection that I'd come to recognize as their standard playbook. By Wednesday afternoon, I boarded the flight back to Cleveland, the hours in the air amplifying my internal resolve to confront the fallout head-on. Landing felt like stepping into a storm I'd anticipated but not fully prepared for. I headed straight to the impound lot, the sterile office reeking of bureaucracy as I signed the paperwork and handed over $1,900 in fees. The attendant eyed me with a mix of sympathy and curiosity, perhaps sensing the undercurrent of personal drama behind the transaction. Retrieving the keys, I approached the Highlander, its familiar shape now tainted by unfamiliar marks. Opening the door unleashed a wave of evidence from their unauthorized excursion, a long scratch etched across the rear passenger panel, sticky residue in the cup holders from spilled drinks, and an overpowering blend of sunscreen and fast food odors that clung to the upholstery. Sand granules littered the floor mats, dog hair coated the seats, and a faint crack spiderwebbed the infotainment display, none of which had existed before my departure. The interior, once meticulously maintained, now bore the scars of neglect, crumpled wrappers tucked into pockets, water bottle rings on the console, and a general disarray that screamed disregard for my property. Driving it home through Cleveland's familiar streets only heightened the sense of intrusion, each bump reminding me of the miles they'd clocked without consent, once inside my quiet house. I parked in the garage, locked it securely, and sank into the kitchen chair, the silence amplifying my thoughts. The initial rage from Monday's revelations began to ebb, replaced by a clearer perspective on the pattern of entitlement. It wasn't just about the car or the bill, it was the cumulative weight of their expectations, treating me as an endless resource rather than an equal. I replayed the voicemails in my mind, their words no longer stinging but solidifying my stance. I was done bending to their narratives, done overlooking the lack of mutual respect that had eroded our connections over time. That evening, I took the first steps toward reclamation, logging into my bank account. I navigated to the recurring payments section and canceled the monthly Amazon shipments of school snacks and supplies I'd set up for Katie's kids, a gesture I'd once viewed as supportive, but now saw as enabling. Next, I contacted the vet clinic, removing my name from the emergency contact list for their family pet, a role I'd assumed during their previous financial tight spots. These actions felt methodical, each click severing a thread of obligation that had bound me unwittingly. No more quiet subsidies, no more filling the gaps they created through poor choices. As night fell, the emotional shift settled in, fully not sorrow or lingering anger, but a profound sense of finality. Their behavior had illuminated the imbalance, the way they valued convenience over consent, and I refused to perpetuate it. The done feeling wasn't dramatic, it was liberating. A quiet acknowledgement that self-preservation demanded distance. For the first time in days, I slept without the undercurrent of unresolved tension, knowing these initial cuts were just the beginning of enforcing boundaries long overdue. That evening, I drove to their house unannounced. The familiar route through Cleveland's suburbs felt charged with purpose as I pulled up to the driveway, the Highlander's engine humming softly before I cut it off. The lights inside glowed warmly, suggesting normalcy. But I knew better. This visit wasn't for reconciliation. Stepping out, I approached the door with steady steps, my mind replaying the calculated breaches that had led to this moment. Before I could knock, the door swung open, revealing my mom with a forced smile plastered on her face, as if expecting a casual drop-in. She greeted me with exaggerated cheer, commenting on how nice it was to see me so soon after my trip, her tone laced with an undercurrent of relief that I'd come around. My dad emerged from the living room, chuckling lightly in an attempt to diffuse any tension, suggesting we all sit down for coffee like old times. Katie lounged on the couch, scrolling her phone without glancing up, while Clayton hovered awkwardly in the background, his expression already hinting at discomfort. The kids played nearby, oblivious, and the dog lounged contentedly, none the wiser to the storm brewing. I didn't waste time on pleasantries, standing firm in the entryway as I laid out the facts plainly. They'd breached my home, taken the car without consent, and dragged my name into a police matter, all while expecting forgiveness. The room shifted instantly, their facades cracking under the weight of my words. My mom recoiled, her voice rising in accusation, claiming I was abandoning them after everything they'd sacrificed. painting herself as the eternal victim in our family dynamic. My dad interjected with talk of loyalty, insisting blood ties demanded I overlook such misunderstandings for the sake of unity, his words carrying the familiar weight of obligation. Katie finally looked up, muttering justifications about it being no big deal, just a weekend getaway to bond, downplaying the intrusion as overreaction on my part. Clayton remained silent throughout, his face etched with regret, eyes darting as if questioning his involvement in this escalating mess. I didn't raise my voice or engage in their deflections, simply reiterating that their actions had severed any remaining trust, no more financial crutches, no more favors to bail them out of binds, no more stepping in for bills or supplies. The declaration hung in the air, stripping away the illusions they'd clung to. Their responses escalated into chaos. My mom's shouts about betrayal echoed through the house. My dad's pleas for family harmony grew desperate. Katie's eye rolls accompanied snide remarks on my supposed coldness, and Clayton's mute stance spoke volumes of second thoughts. The kids paused their play, sensing the shift, but I held my ground, unmoved by the theatrics, turning to leave without further debate. I walked back to the car, the door closing behind me with finality, driving away. I powered off my phone, the screen's glow fading into darkness as I navigated the quiet streets toward home. The night's stillness enveloped me, free from the incessant pings that had plagued the past days. Settling into bed later, sleep came easier than expected, unburdened by the usual undercurrents of unresolved guilt. In that quiet aftermath, a subtle tranquility began to emerge, not the sharp edge of anger from before, but a grounded peace rooted in clarity. Their outburst had only confirmed the necessity of my boundaries, highlighting the imbalance I'd tolerated far too long. It wasn't vengeance driving me, it was self-respect. A recognition that peace came from releasing what no longer served. The confrontation, though intense, marked a pivot, allowing me to envision a path forward untethered from their expectations. For the first time, the silence felt empowering rather than isolating, a space where I could rebuild without the weight of their demands pressing in. The peace didn't last long. By the next morning, my inbox overflowed with messages from extended relatives, a clear sign that the smear campaign had begun. Voicemails from aunts I rarely spoke to urged forgiveness, stressing that families were inherently complicated but ultimately worth preserving. Their words echoing the victim narrative my mom had undoubtedly spun. A cousin long out of touch texted about loyalty, implying I'd overreacted to a minor borrowing incident, leaving them stranded and burdened with costs. Even the parent of one of Katie's acquaintances reached out, suggesting I reconsider for the children's sake. None of these contacts originated from me. I hadn't shared the details beyond the immediate circle, yet the story had morphed into one where I appeared as the heartless aggressor, turning on them over a simple car use, forcing a humiliating return home. Lori's handiwork was evident in the distortions portraying herself as the devoted mother betrayed by an ungrateful daughter, omitting the unauthorized entry, the police involvement, and the resulting damages. The manipulation spread through calls and social media whispers, painting a picture of abandonment that conveniently ignored their role in the escalation. It stirred a familiar frustration, but also a determination to counter with facts rather than emotion. I wasn't seeking vindication, I simply wanted the record straight, free from their filtered lens, composing a group message to the relatives who'd contacted me. I detailed the sequence without embellishment: the garage breach using a retained code, the duplicated keys misuse, the out-of-state trip that led to the towing, and the lies to authorities when confronted. I attached the impound receipt as proof of the $1,900 hit, along with photos capturing the scratches, sticky interiors, and cracked screen that hadn't existed prior. The message clarified this wasn't isolated. It built on prior incidents where boundaries were trampled, culminating in my refusal to enable further disregard. Sending it felt methodical, a release of suppressed truths into the open. The responses trickled in gradually, shifting the dynamics in unexpected ways. Robin, my cousin who often heard the family grapevine, called first, sharing her own uneasy encounters with Laurie's tendency to twist situations for sympathy. She described similar patterns of exaggeration that had strained other relationships, validating my experience without prompting. An uncle followed with an apology, admitting he'd been misled about the severity, expressing regret for jumping to conclusions based on partial accounts. Two more cousins messaged support, revealing their discomfort with the ongoing favoritism toward Katie that had alienated others over time. As the truth circulated, the tide turned perceptibly, not dramatically, but enough to isolate the core instigators. Relatives who'd initially sided with the family began withdrawing, some skipping planned gatherings or offering quiet solidarity. I didn't pursue alliances or revel in the reversal. My intent was transparency, allowing others to form their own views unclouded by bias. The exposure stripped away the facade, highlighting the entitlement that had festered unchecked, yet my family doubled down rather than reflect. Laurie appeared at my doorstep the next day, arms laden with snacks she knew I favored, feigning a routine visit as if no rift existed. Her smile rang hollow, a thinly veiled attempt to ingratiate and erode my stance. When I didn't engage, Patrick took to lingering in my driveway upon my return from errands, blocking the path with casual conversation about moving past the misunderstanding. His presence felt intrusive, a physical manifestation of their refusal to accept consequences. These tactics only reinforced my detachment, underscoring the depth of their denial. I politely but firmly directed them off the property, warning of further measures if the intrusions continued. Internally, the encounters evoked no turmoil, only a reinforced conviction that protecting my space was essential. The family's persistence, devoid of accountability, served as a stark reminder of why distance was necessary, allowing me to navigate the fallout with a steadier outlook. 2 weeks passed in relative quiet. What began as a habitual glance at my banking app evolved into a stark exposure of further betrayal, reshaping my view of the family's reach. Navigating the transaction ledger, I uncovered a trail of modest withdrawals summing to roughly $600, cleverly spaced to avoid immediate detection. Tracing the digital footprints, the source IP aligned precisely with their household, erasing any doubt about the perpetrators. This covert siphoning, layered atop the recent vehicular overstep, stirred a profound dismay, underscoring how their presumptions had infiltrated even my fiscal safeguards. An email from Katie materialized the next day, brimming with acrimony and indictments. She condemned my boundaries as merciless, framing my withdrawal of support as a callous fixation on wealth over relations. Her phrasing steeped in the guile I'd learned to anticipate. Embedded in her critique was a pivotal oversight. She implied my aloofness arose from an air of elitism, tied to escaping their daily struggles, as though my self-sufficiency mandated perpetual aid for their shortcomings. This candid exposure illuminated the simmering jealousies driving their conduct, reinforcing my determination to extricate from the entangled dependencies, compounding the revelations. Indirect reports of my mom's health decline filtered through a peripheral family member, positing cardiac complications aggravated by my actions. Dubious of the veracity, I conducted a prudent verification with her medical provider, respecting disclosure limits during the exchange. The feedback was definitive: no cardiovascular ailments documented, solely dubious communications from a pretender mimicking my identity, concocting crises to invoke pity. This orchestrated deception, crafted to resurrect obligation and submission, unveiled the extremes of their scheming, dissolving whatever vestiges of compassion lingered. Equipped with this accumulating proof, I consulted an attorney versed in familial and asset protections to construct unbreachable defenses, recounting the home incursion, the clandestine key replication, the towing episode, and presently the monetary meddling coupled with the wellness fabrication. We advanced to invalidate archaic power of attorney forms from earlier times. We methodically severed residual economic connections, including auxiliary funds I'd initiated amid past leniency, and purged my information from healthcare proxy rosters prone to abuse. The consultation broadened to overhauling entry protocols for my dwelling, automobile, and virtual platforms, reinforcing barriers against subsequent violations. Amid these proceedings, a fundamental comprehension dawned. This wasn't confined to sporadic lapses such as the excursion or impound charges. It pervaded the entirety of my personal sphere. Their presumption of rights cast my attainments as collective entitlements, ripe for extraction sans approval or appreciation, undermining my self-reliance at every turn. Acknowledging this all-encompassing intrusion cultivated an unwavering disengagement, converting ambiguous disquiet into an explicit mandate for autonomy. A few days later, the silence broke. Robin forwarded me an invitation to a family barbecue in Cleveland, the details revealing their latest maneuver to marginalize my presence. The attached photo, an old group shot from happier times, had been edited to excise me entirely, cropping my figure out as if I'd never been part of the memory. The event excluded me outright. Yet, in the descriptions, they positioned Dawn, my colleague who'd held the spare key, as a stand-in helper, toasting her contributions in my stead. It was a deliberate rewrite, attempting to fill the void with someone peripheral. But the effort rang hollow, underscoring their desperation to maintain appearances amid the fallout. Shortly after, an envelope appeared at my door, containing a handwritten note from Lori, her script laden with accusations rather than reflection. It extended a so-called final opportunity for amends, devoid of any acknowledgement for the breaches or damages inflicted. Instead, shifting blame onto my alleged selfishness, I discarded it without response, the act symbolizing a broader severance from their influence. This prompted my final steps toward complete disconnection. I updated my phone number, refreshed all passwords across accounts, and even sold off furniture pieces they'd once used to evoke obligation during visits. These measures, executed methodically over a quiet weekend, fortified my independence, erasing the last tangible links to their world. The repercussions for them materialized gradually but tangibly. Rooted in the real-world constraints of their choices, without my discreet financial buffers, they triggered a security alert on a lingering joint account, prompting the bank to contact me for verification. I instructed a permanent unlink, severing the final economic tie that had enabled their habits. This left them grappling with mounting difficulties. Unpaid medical bills accumulated as routine checkups became burdensome, forcing reliance on public assistance programs if they qualified under income thresholds, a common recourse in Ohio for those in similar straits. Katie, in particular, faced the brunt, navigating child-related expenses solo, turning to welfare options like SNAP or childcare subsidies to bridge gaps. Her previous dependencies exposed as unsustainable, their social isolation deepened as well, with relatives distancing themselves after the truths surfaced, skipping events or offering muted interactions that highlighted the favoritism's toll. The family's attempts to rally support faltered, leaving them in an echo chamber of their own making, where excuses no longer held sway. These outcomes weren't vindictive on my part. They stemmed directly from withdrawing the crutches I'd unwittingly provided. allowing natural consequences to unfold in a system where self-reliance often dictates stability. Amid this unfolding, a profound tranquility settled over me, not as a victor in conflict, but as a survivor emerging from prolonged entanglement. I wasn't the antagonist they'd portrayed, nor the rescuer they'd expected. I was simply reclaiming agency, viewing the severed bridge in my rear view without regret. The experience reframed my perspective, illuminating how their actions had masqueraded as affection while eroding my boundaries. From this, a vital lesson emerged: establishing firm limits safeguards mental well-being, essential in discerning and distancing from toxic dynamics that masquerade as kinship. Prioritizing oneself isn't selfishness, it's empowerment, granting the freedom to thrive unencumbered. For anyone navigating similar waters, this narrative underscores the value in recognizing patterns early, fostering resilience through intentional separation when mutual respect falters. It equips with the insight that true peace often lies in release, empowering choices that honor personal integrity over imposed obligations.